Hey, what's up, friend? Are you a mama who wants to stop just getting by? Maybe you're motivated to grow yourself in your motherhood, your marriage, and you want it to bear fruit. Or maybe you want to stop letting the mom guilt, the shame, the limiting beliefs, and lies. Amen. That's me right there, sister. And start stepping into the woman and the truth that God has created you to be. While we're juggling all the things, right? Nursing a baby, battling laundry, trying to keep it together, and a spicy marriage. But where the heck do we start? Hey friend, you are in the right place. I am here to hold your hand through this journey because I believe when you're ready to take control of your life, beat the limiting excuses, and step into the woman God created you to be, you can not only survive, but you can thrive. But you're gonna have to show up for yourself. It's time for me to tough love your way through taking self-care seriously, investing and growing in your marriage, and owning your motherhood, and getting rid of those excuses because the glory is in the journey. It's in the mess. In this podcast, you'll find navigating mom guilt, mindset, and marriage strategies and everything in between, with no fluff and lots of fun. Let's go. Hey, happy whatever day it is for you. Today I am doing a topic that was mentioned in the So She Grows mom community. If you aren't in there, you need to get in there now. As we get close to the launch of the Marriage Method course, which I have worked so hard between nap times to get this dang thing done. I've poured my blood, sweat, and sleep-deprived tears into. You guys, this is the thing that you need to reboot your marriage, to create good, healthy communication, connection, so many great things that will help you be fruitful and have a more God-centered marriage. This is for you. In all stages of marriage. I have videos, I have tools in there, and you also get my goal setting workbook for couples, which is no longer free. I was giving it away a long time ago, no longer free. You can't get it anymore. So that launches this Friday. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So keep your eyes out for that. So leading up to the launch of the Marriage Method course, I'm doing all topics on marriage. And for the first 10 people that purchase the Marriage Method course, I'm going to be doing a special guest group session. I can't share anything else with you about it right now, but it's definitely worth way more. You just get it for free, but holy cow, the price of what she normally charges, you're going to want to take advantage of this. So anyways, let's get to it. Today's topic is how to fight productively. And this was a topic brought to you by somebody in the Facebook community. And when I asked you guys what you wanted to hear about marriage-wise, this was one of the topics, and this is one of the things that I have obviously struggled with at some point and still continuously. I have my pitfalls, right, that I have to be aware of and continuously work on. But there are things that I have picked up along the way that I wanted to share with you that makes fighting productive when you're married and having conflict as a couple. So my first tip for you is start your conversations with I statements. Never have a conflict and start out with, you did this, you don't do that, you always do this, you never do that. When we take responsibility for our own actions, for them, it already lessens the battlefield, right? It already calms the storm a little bit because they're like, okay, she's not just coming to the table just throwing bows, pointing at me, accusing me of all these things. She's taking responsibility for her own self and her part in this situation as well. And when we do it this way, it also helps us to put our walls down, okay? So when we're saying I feel like you aren't listening to me, however, I know that you probably are. It just comes off that way. Okay, so it's saying, giving them the benefit of the doubt. So you're not accusatory, right? You're not telling them what it is, because we hate when people say that. We hate when, our kids hate it too. I'm going through that with my kiddos right now where I'm you just rolled your eyes. No, I didn't, Mom. Or I say, you were trying to put your brother down. No, I wasn't. Or, whatever. We don't like to be told what we are doing, or we don't like people to accuse us of things, even if it came off that way, right? Because if your intentions aren't that, then man, it really makes you mad when you are accused of something that you honestly weren't doing, even if it came off that way. So we don't want to do that in our fights because we want this to be a safe zone. When it becomes toxic, when it becomes just mines everywhere, then that's when fights become this knockout, blowout, drag out, really bad thing, okay? So first off, use I statements. I feel like this. And then you always try to like follow it up with some sort of positive statement to give them the benefit of the doubt, to show them that you're not here to just blame them. You're just here to share your perspective, what you feel like is going on. Number 2, this one I've talked about a lot in the podcast, is something that my husband forces me to do all the time. And I always resist. I don't know. I tell you guys all the time to do it. You can still resist as long as one of you is the strong one, right? And you stick to your guns on this one, and it's to hold hands. Okay, so my husband's going to listen to this, and he's going to laugh, and he's going to roll his eyes. He's going to think it's hilarious because he is the one who does this. He's the one who's like, give me your hands. And every time I'm like, no, I don't want to, because I want to be mad. Like, we get in our feelings and it's hard for us to transition. Just like when we get mad at our kids and we like, it becomes funny and then they get mad at us for making them laugh or for it to start being funny, right? Like, we have a hard time transitioning and being like, okay, we're actually ridiculous right now. Or like, it's okay to be mad and to also experience joy. Like, that is so complicated mid-fight, because we could be fighting about something serious, but then your spouse brings you joy, or you know that like it's going to be okay. This is a really hard thing, but like at the same time experiencing silliness and like laughter during it just feels so complicated to where you're like, oh, I can't do that. Like, don't make me laugh. It's not funny right now. I'm so mad, right? Like, but that's exactly what it does when we hold hands. Somehow when you're holding hands, it's hard to get all up in each other's face. It's hard to put up the walls. It's hard to feel like, it's hard to cross your arms. It's hard to carry the weapons. Like, there's something about holding hands that is like, okay, it's not you and I against each other. It's like us against this problem. And then how are we going to solve it? So you're going to feel ridiculous as long as one of you can be like, hold my hands. Like, no, we need to hold hands. Like, and then you need to genuinely be like, okay, this is for the good of us. I know that it helps me relax mid confrontation, mid fight or whatever. So as long as you can keep that in mind to do that, it works. Okay. My next tip is know your triggers, y'all. Do not try and have a fight when you are sleep deprived, when you haven't even eaten a single bit of cheese. I don't know what I'm talking about. When you haven't eaten a single thing except like some leftover peas on your kid's plate, okay? Like, do not try to have a productive conversation when you're hangry, okay? If you know that when you're hungry, you're irritable, you're upset, or you're tired and you get emotional, like, if you already know that, don't try to have a serious conversation right now. Don't try to talk about your problems right now, because then not only are you talking about your problems and your issues, but then all these underlying things and triggering things are coming up, and they're going to show up in the middle of your fights. I'm pretty sure this happened to me like a couple weeks ago when we're just building this house and living in this RV, and it's been a longer process than anticipated, and it's getting harder and harder on me mentally and just all these things, right? Like, just we're in that season of life where, man, it's just a season, okay? And so I waited to have this conversation until like I was already drained. I was already burnt out. I was already exhausted, sleep deprived, tired. I felt like I had no more to give. And then I chose this one topic of a situation that was bothering me. But what showed up was all these other things. So what could have been like a couple sentences of like, hey, I am feeling really stressed right now. Could you help me pick up this and that and that? Like, it was this just outpouring of emotions over picking up something, when really it was like all the things. It was everything, and it just all poured out. And so then it's like, okay, what I'm really feeling right now is that I'm burnt out, and that's what's showing up. And so it's super confusing to your spouses, because they're like, what do I do with all this? And like, most of the time I can circle back and then be like, okay, or my husband can be aware and be like, I think what's really going on here is you are pouring yourself out in too many areas. You don't have an outlet, and yada yada, which was the case for me. But so know your triggers. Don't have a conversation at the end of the night if you're ready, like if you're depleted, if you like he's depleted, like be honorable of not only your triggers and what's going on with you, but also his. Like, if he had a bad day at work, he's been dealing with family issues like all day, on top of the fact that he hasn't eaten anything all day, or that he ate junk and now he feels like crap. Like, keep in mind these things, because they matter. I know that you forget and you think that they don't apply because they're not physical, they're not tangible, but they do matter and they affect the way that we show up and the way that we communicate. Okay, so my tip number 4, hopefully you guys are keeping up. I like to talk fast so that way I can get through these real quick because I know y'all don't have time, okay? I know we're busy mamas. So number 4, check your criticism at the door. This is something I'm working on right now, especially with my daughter, my tween, who is mimicking everything that I do. And she's like a mirror, man, and it's harsh to be like, oh, dang, I do that. But it is, as a fight or flight and survival mechanism, grew up pointing out the flaw before I could trust or have faith in anything or give a compliment or look at the positive, bright side of things, okay? So it was a mechanism, and it's a habit that now at 30 years plus, right, is hard to get rid of, and now I see my daughter doing it, and so now I'm becoming very aware of the fact that I need to now work on transitioning out of this way that I handle situations. So anyways, if you start with criticism, though, if you start pointing out all the negative things, all the ways that they fall short, all the things that they do wrong, all the things that you don't like about them, right? Like, just if somebody was to come to you, which here's another tip, if you need help with your fights in doing that, pretend like your spouse is somebody else. For a minute, think about them as a child of God's son, like God's son. How do you think God would feel if he heard you talking to his son saying, you're good for nothing? Now, like friends, if your husband is really good for nothing, I mean, that's one thing, okay? But like if our husbands just can't manage to get the socks in the hamper, then maybe we need to rethink our strategy on communicating here, right? Or like if you would talk to a friend about a conflict, like how would you talk to them? Y'all, we have to talk to each other with respect and in a healthy, productive way. Pointing fingers, calling names, and all this stuff, like all it does is create drama. It creates fights that blow up. It creates fights that point fingers, and it's not productive. Y'all want a productive, communicating conversation. This is it, okay? So become aware of what you're doing, how you're speaking to people, because it matters, and it will determine the way that this conflict goes, right? If you're always critical of them and you point out all these things during a conflict, they're going to expect that every time you guys go to bat in a conflict, right? So they're already going to show up defensive. They're already going to show up with their walls up. They're already going to show up ready to fight, right? You would, if somebody was constantly critical of what you're doing. Like, I mean, just think about how maybe it's a mother-in-law or a sister or something is always critical about the way you keep your house, right? So already before they come over, you're already dreading. You're like, I know she's going to call me out about this and that and that. Oh my gosh, right? Or when they approach you with it, have a conversation, you're already ready to go to like throw arms, right? You're ready to put up your dukes. Is that a thing that we say still? I don't know. But right, like you get defensive already. So just think about it in that perspective. When you go into a conflict conversation, that's how they're going to show up too. Okay, here's my tip number 5 for you guys. Communicate. We talk about this in the marriage method course. I have a whole section about it, okay? And I'm telling you guys about, I think it's like 5 or 6 ways of communicating that we should be doing each and every day. And I also give you a list of weekly questions that you should be asking that prevent this from happening. Here's what I'm talking about. When you don't communicate daily things, then all the little things pile up. Either because you're afraid to start conflict, you don't think it's a big deal, or you're hoping that they're going to notice so that we don't have to say anything, you guys, which we need to get over that idea of my husband should notice, or he should do that without me asking. It is like, why even put that on the table, right? Like, let's just not assume, which assumptions get us in trouble, you guys, if you haven't figured that out already. I'm learning that very quickly. So let's help each other out. Like, let's not set them up for failure. Let's set them up for success so that way we can all function and fight less, okay? So first, let's talk about not letting things pile up, because that's when a fight becomes huge. Talk about these things one thing at a time as they come up. And if it causes friction, it causes friction. But you know what happens when you let all those things pile up? Then it's like a volcano, and the pressure is just building and building and building and building. And then it becomes one of those fights where you're like, you know what? Like when you're like, hey babe, could you pick this up? And he doesn't pick up this one fork off the floor or something. And then you're like, all these things, right? You have like this blackout moment where like all these flashbacks come to you of all these times where he didn't do all these random things, right? And then you're like, you should be able to do this without me telling you, and all these things, right? That's what happens when we don't communicate all these little things along the way, which we just you have to be more verbal, and you can't be afraid to voice your feelings. It's not too much, okay? Trust your instincts, voice your opinion. It's what needs to happen. Otherwise, the volcano will explode. So also, let's talk about one thing at a time. Do not go to your spouse and then be like, hey, I've been holding on to all these things. I've been trying not to say these things in order to avoid conflict. But now I feel like our marriage is rocky. I feel like I can't keep up with the laundry. I feel like I need help with the kids. You don't help around the house. We're never intimate anymore. I don't like it when you do this in bed. I also don't like when your mom does this and that and that. And your uncle is trying to come over and all these things, right? Like then it becomes this overwhelming, and their argument, and their eyes glaze over, and then they shut down, or you shut down, or it's just too much. And again, all these other emotions get involved, and then it's just this big, overwhelming, unproductive fight because you have too much on the table for anybody to digest or anybody to come up with a solution. There's like no way to move forward. You're just stuck in the mud, surrounded by all this mess that you just verbal vomited everywhere. So choose one thing at a time, which is important and is easier to do if we are communicating regularly and sharing our feelings and our struggles regularly, okay? Then it's not this on a Sunday, I'm going to unpack all these things from the week previously. Don't do that. It's unhealthy and it's not fun for anybody. Okay, so here is a example of a way that you could say something is you could say, I love you, and then you can insert the issue. So I love you, but I've noticed that we're struggling, or I'm struggling with our intimate times. I'm having trouble feeling connected to you when we're being intimate, but I want to figure this out. How can we do this together? And you can change that. But do you see like how it's like, hey, I'm feeling, and then you talk about the issue, and then you say, hey, but like we're a team, so how can we figure this out together? Not like you need to go figure out what you're doing wrong and come back and tell me, right? Like we don't feel alienated. We don't feel attacked. We feel like, hey, we're a team. We're going to attack the issue together instead of it's me versus you situation. Another example of sharing your daily things is, like I said earlier, I'm feeling stressed. Will you help me pick up today? Don't assume that they know. Another thing that I've provided in the course is a printout of, it's like a blank sheet that has a guide for you guys to list out things while it's like says, hey, babe, while I'm busy or something like that. If you're not busy, it says, hey, babe, if you're not busy. And then it's a list of things that you would like to look at. Like for me, in my mind, I'm thinking while I'm laying the kids down, my husband could have checked the dryer to see if things needed to be folded. Or he could have checked the washer to see if things need to be moved from the washer to the dryer. Or check the sink if there's dishes in there. Can you please go ahead and do those, right? But they don't think about those things like we do because this is not their realm. Or maybe if you're in the workforce and he's at home, right? Just like they have a system at home and you have a thing at work, right? Like we don't know how to sometimes go into each other's environments and pick up where the last person left off without that communication. So if they can look at the list and go, okay, she would like me to check the dryer to see if, and the washer to see if there's anything that needs to be moved over or folded. He goes and looks. There's nothing in there. Everything's ready to go. Everything's already been done. Okay, next thing on the list, there's dishes in the sink. Awesome. I'm going to go do those, right? Like, so these are ways to communicate what needs to be done. So that way you aren't building up resentment, watching him watch TV while you are thinking that he should know what to do, but at the same time, you're not verbalizing what you need. Okay. Y'all, this is hard for me right now. I just had a moment where I was like, oh, I just sucker punched myself in the gut. Okay. So instead of building resentment, we should have to communicate what we need instead of assuming that they know. Okay. Okay. So 6, pick a right time and place. They always say never fight in the bedroom because that should be your holy space. Okay. Don't fight in the place that is supposed to be your guys' sacred area, the place that you go together to be intimate. Okay. We do sometimes because sometimes there's just no other space. Maybe sit on the floor, don't sit on the bed. Maybe, like especially if it's a normal fight, I say it's fine. If it's a fight about intimacy, maybe not. Maybe move to the floor, maybe move to somewhere that's less, I don't know, triggering. Okay. If you're talking about sex and stuff and you're in the bedroom, like that could be slightly awkward or triggering for one of you, okay? I've also heard the advice that maybe going on a walk so that we aren't facing each other. It's not like this visual ization of you versus him because you're facing each other, right? Like, but if you're walking together, you're both facing in a neutral direction, not towards each other, but you're, in nature, you're outside. It can be less confrontational. So you just have to gauge what is best for you, knowing how you guys have responded in previous conversations and situations, and see which one feels better for you. And if you go for a walk, maybe that's helpful because there's no kids around you. Okay? I don't know. You got to kind of trust your gut instincts, but then also be logical when we're choosing a time and a place. Probably not the best time to bring up an argument that you've been holding on to for the past month at Easter dinner or, a family gathering, right? Like that's why we talk about things in the moment when it comes up, but we choose the right time. We're intentional about making sure that it's not right when they walk through the door, right? We want them to always feel welcome coming home. And that's sometimes hard because we have kids and we're ready to be like, it's your turn, drop it, like, right? It's hard. It's something that we have to practice and something that we have to be aware of and something that we're going to fall short on. Then we're like, dang it, we can always circle back. This is the thing that I've learned that has helped me the most and that is helping me get better each and every time is even when I mess up to circle back and be like, oh, like, I'm sorry for attacking you when you first came home. And I'm still working on this. Like, it's not easy. It feels awkward sometimes, especially when you didn't grow in a home that apologized like mine. So it feels really awkward, really vulnerable. Like I failed. It's like, it's just really hard to circle back. But the one thing that I've learned is that nobody else is impacted by the lack of me circling back or apologizing later but myself and my marriage. So that's on me. Like, nobody's watching me. I'm not on a reality TV show. Nobody's going to judge me. Nobody's watching me. Like, so it is on us at home, in our homes, in our marriages to show up and take responsibility and be able to circle back and be like, you know what? I screwed that up. Can we try that again? Can we start over? What I meant to say was blah, 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 right? Or, hey, like, I totally let all my emotions out on you. A lot of it's because I'm sleep deprived. I'm still struggling with this, that, and the other. But like, I know we're a team. Can we figure this out together? Right? I think it's the circling back that is so healing for the both of you because we mess up. We're human, right? We respond in ugly ways sometimes. But the circling back is like, oh, wait, like, it's just really... I don't know. I don't have the word for it, but I know that when it happens and when you do it, it really changes the response of the other person. It really changes the atmosphere of the fight. It really helps boundaries like stay solid, walls to be brought down. It's just really super healthy for you guys to do in a conflict situation, even if you circle back 3 hours later. Okay. And then the last thing is to focus on the resolution instead of the fight itself. Like, we don't need to hash out all these things, which is something that I think we get stuck in, is like beating this conversation to a pulp because we want them to see and really understand our perspective. But at the same time, I think this is not good or beneficial as if you're looking for the productivity of the conversation. Like, if you want your conversation to have results and to make change, then we need to focus less on the situation or the struggle itself and then focus on, okay, how are we moving forward? Like, that's what needs to happen. I think we get stuck in the fight itself, and then after the end, we have no energy or no will to decide how we're actually going to take forward moving steps, which is the most important thing. Like, what good is a conflict, like a fight or a conversation, if then after that it just sits there and nothing happens because we spent 30 hours talking about it, beating it to a pulp that now it's like too much and we don't even know what first step to take. So I think we need to just say, like, hey, like I said earlier, like, right, I love you, but I am having trouble feeling connected to you or enjoying our intimate times together. I want to figure this out. How can we do that together, right? So now you already stated your issue. You don't have to beat it to a pulp and be like, that position, like all these things, right? Like, some of that is okay, but we don't need to just pulverize this issue for hours. We just need to move on and be like, okay, so how are we going to, like, what's our first step? What do you feel? What do you think? Maybe we start calendaring our intimate time. Maybe we start doing this, or maybe we do less of that, or maybe we blah, 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 right? Again, we talk about intimacy in the marriage method course. I think I called the title of the section Connect and Do the Hanky Panky, because that's just how I am. I didn't want the title just to be intimacy, because every time I saw that, I was reading it in like a infomercial type voice of like intimacy for best results. Try this at night. Side effects are blah, blah, blah. Like it just felt really boring and really cold. I didn't like it. So Connect to Do the Hanky Panky. There's a lot of good tips in there. Anyways, so those are my tips on how to fight productively. It's a lot, but these are the things that I feel like I am applying, working on constantly, failing at constantly, asking for forgiveness. I'm working on that being constantly. But like, I think that that's the whole point and the purpose of everything that we do is not to criticize ourselves, not to blame ourselves, shame ourselves, guilt ourselves, but to acknowledge. And I think that's the biggest step. That's the best thing out of it all, is when you realize that, hey, like, I'm not probably fighting in the best way. Like, just realizing that you have a problem is the whole thing of it all, right? Like, because then you can start to take forward moving motions to transform or change things little by little. And we're human. So then we can give ourselves grace of like, hey, I'm trying, I'm going to mess up, and then I'm going to try again. Hey, I'm trying, I'm going to mess up, but I'm going to try again, which is something that I've been showing my daughter. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, she's picking up habits of mine that aren't that great about being critical. Right. So then I told her the other day, I was like, hey, I tend to do this. I tend to point out the flaw, point out something negative before I, congratulate somebody or point out the positive or celebrate with somebody, right? So I see you doing that, and I'm going to tell you, like, that's not the right way. Like, you're going to miss out on so much happiness if you do that. It's going to hurt so many relationships if you do that. It's a bad habit to break later on if you do that now. Please don't do what I'm doing. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of my flaw that I do that. I'm working on it. So I want you to work on it too. Anyways, so those 7 tips: I statements, hold hands, know your triggers, check your criticism out the door, communicate daily things, daily issues, have a right time and a right place, talk about and schedule, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. When are you free? Where can we do this? Maybe you have to sit in the car. Maybe you go get like fries and get a milkshake and like, have a conversation, right? Like whatever you feel like would be making it a less confrontational, more safe space for the both of you. And you can even talk about that. You can even plan about that. Like, hey, what are the best situations that you like to talk about conflicts? Like, I don't want to have conflicts with you, but we're going to fight, right? Like, that's a part of life. We're going to fight. It's part of being married. So like, what would make conflicts or discussing conflicts more comfortable for you or easier for you? And then number 7 is focus on the resolution, not the fight or the issue itself. So I hope you guys utilize those. Take notes. Listen to this 1,000 times. I'm going to probably look through my notebook and just be like, oh my gosh, Ashley, you have so much to work on. But grace, acknowledging grace. I'm not going to guilt myself. And then I'm going to ask for forgiveness 1,000 times. And I'm still going to do forward moving motions into applying all these things so that way I can become better each day in each season of our married life, which is the point is forward moving motion and growth. And that's where fruitfulness comes from. It's slow, it's steady, but it's sure, and it's always there. And God shows up when you include him in your marriages, when you pray and you include him in your struggles. And you're like, hey, God, help me out here. So I want that for you. I hope you had some nuggets that you could pull from this episode. I hope you share it with another mama who is going through a season maybe of conflict with her spouse, and this can help her as well, and join her in this conversation of you're not alone. We are not alone. This motherhood marriage thing. Stay tuned for the Marriage Method course launch this Friday. I'm so pumped for you guys to dive into that and see how God works and how your work will bear fruit in your marriages and in just in your self-growth, man. So good, because I don't only focus on marriage, I focus on you, girl. So I am so pumped. I'm so pumped. So that's it for today, and I will catch you next time.